themselves in some of these positions?
Thank you, Grace. I'm just going to leave my video off for my own bandwidth. I see my network is having issues. So
no problem.
The one thing I normally like to notify people on, having had a career, especially in a male-dominated environment, is that we get taught in terms of, I'm going to call it intellect, but when we move to a working environment, it has more to do with our emotional intelligence. And part of emotional intelligence is the ability to communicate effectively, the ability to understand what is required of us, and having the confidence to set necessary boundaries in terms of knowing how you are needed to work, how your manager expects you to work, and being able to deliver that in a way that is conducive to your health, your personal life, your professional life. So most of us really, when you say, are we naive? Potentially, yes. When we start work, we are. And if we don't do any work to develop ourselves personally, we then find ourselves, I'm going to call it, having suffered the bullying at work, having trauma of, I'm going to call it, bosses that make us feel insecure, make us feel small. So it is now the work we need to do to develop our confidence again.
And with some of that work that needs to be done, how much would you say a lot of that would have to come with time or with experience? Or is there a way that people can be able to even just identify these situations, like people crossing boundaries? I mean, you find that you know that there's a boundary being crossed, but you allow it to be crossed anyway.
Okay. I would say anyone starting out a career, please, it is so important. There is no need for us to go in and be abused first before we say, oh, okay, I need to do it. No, guys, we need to equip ourselves. It's a new field. What is needed here? If you go into any game, be it tennis, be it rugby, be it soccer, there are rules of the game. If you don't know the rules of the game, there is no way you're going to win at the game, no matter how good you are. So when you are starting out in your career, when you are starting out in your new role, it is imperative you get yourself a mentor, you get yourself a coach, you understand the difference between the two so that you can better support and enable yourself to thrive.
Thank you so much for that, Boniswa. Nandi, I'm going to come back to you. She spoke about rules of the game. Harassment is one of those, how can I call them, unwritten rules that come about, where, let me just read to you what I found. Harassment is one of those issues that are protected by the law and is recognized as unfair discrimination. So when we talk about rules of the game and we talk about harassment, what is harassment? Because we talk about bullying, we talk about sexual harassment, we talk about an overbearing manager. That's not something anyone can teach you. Those are not written rules. So when we say harassment, what exactly would harassment, what does it mean? Hello?
Sorry, I was on mute there for a minute. So harassment at work, it takes form in many ways, right? And it's something that takes place quite frequently. And ultimately, we need to also work from a place of understanding that the employer has a duty to protect the employees from all forms of harassment. And employers should always have a company policy in place to handle such issues. And to a certain extent, harassment can also constitute an unfair discrimination, right? So the idea is within a relationship, an employment relationship, an employer is supposed to treat all employees fairly and equitably, right? And when an employer fails to treat, to fairly treat an employee for whatever reason that seems that's either arbitrary or that one can, when you look at the situation, you think, I'm just being treated unfairly, that could, and you can actually substantiate with evidence, that can actually could amount to what we call harassment. So harassment then creates an offensive and a very intimidating work environment, and it's considered by the courts to be the most heinous misconduct that plagues the workplace, because it's something that it's so subtle in some instances, and it's so difficult sometimes to monitor and to call, and to see it, but it often starts with the person feeling feeling unfairly treated and feeling like, okay, maybe something's wrong with me. It becomes, it's sort of a subjective process that goes on, but essentially, because of that, because of how it manifests itself in the workplace, it's something that becomes very difficult for some employers to sort of to call it out and possibly discipline the perpetrators of that of harassment at work.
No, thank you so much for that. I like what you said about it. It starts off as a feeling of being unfairly treated. And that's a feeling that a lot of us are familiar with, either early on in our careers or in our current careers. And it's something that if someone was to ask you, but what's wrong, it's very difficult, like you said, to put your finger on it, or even to give it a name without being assumed that you're taking things you're too sensitive, or you can't take a joke. So I just want to go through some of the common forms of harassment. And so I'm going to bring you in here as my fireball. But just to talk about what has been identified and some of the words that have been given to some of these feelings. Well, the first one we're going to go through each of them, but discuss them as we go. So the first one being bullying. Bullying can be many things. Bullying can be people talking badly about you. I mean, we all thought that we left bullying in high school or in primary school, but it seems to have followed us well into our adult lives. So bullying can be many things to many people. It can be an overbearing manager. It can be colleagues who gossip too much about you, who make you feel excluded, it can even have elements of sabotage. So Khomotso, I'm just going to bring you in here. Please tell us more about what is bullying, and how would one even recognize from a legal sense what bullying is?
So I think it's very difficult to define bullying. I think it's quite a subjective type of situation. I mean, even if you imagine a schoolyard bully, that bullying could look like different things. I like what you talked about in relation to things like gossiping, making people feel excluded, sabotage in some cases. Sometimes people gang up on people at work, that kind of thing. Even sort of insensitive comments that are sort of disguised as teasing, having good fun, we're having a laugh, that can sometimes end up being bullying. But what's difficult is that, in the context of this kind of thing, sometimes it's not easy to demonstrate that you're being bullied without looking oversensitive. People will say, oh, people gossip about you, you're a grown-up, ignore them. But it's such a significant impact on your day-to-day work life. And it's also very difficult to demonstrate and to name, this is what so-and-so did. Can you, lay a grievance because someone gossiped about you? You can, depending on the nature of what they said. So those kinds of things are up in the air a lot of the time. It's things you wouldn't even think you're going to be dealing with in a workplace, but you end up dealing with.
Bonnie, let me bring you in here. I know you've done a lot of work around bullying and helping people become bully proof. And I suppose one of those things would be learning how to speak to a bully. I mean, we should have learned these things when we were in the playground, like Khomotso rightfully said. It comes across as play. But if you've never actually learned how to speak to a bully or put your boundaries down with a bully, it never actually stops, because again, you're like, am I being petty? Am I going to be seen as petty? Am I going to be seen as, oh, why don't you just focus on your job? how would you, from an EQ point of view, how would you address a bully? How would you speak up to a bully? And mind you, some of these things, it's either it's a colleague, even when it's a colleague, it might be a colleague who's very close to the manager. So you putting your foot down might actually, I'll just call it what it is, might be a career limiting move in some instances, especially if you actually do go against some of these managers and positions on power. So how would you suggest that people, one, recognize what bullying is? Because like Nandi said, it starts off as a feeling and you know what it is, but how would you then talk to this bully?
I'm smiling because really this is one of the most important things to understand. I normally would ask my clients as a coach and ask them this one question: what makes you bullyable? What makes you, you know how dogs can smell a scent? Bullies can smell who they can bully. Bullies don't bully everyone. So anyone who's watching, yes, anyone who's watching, anyone who's being bullied, please answer this to yourself. This is your own answer. What is making you to be the target? And could it be because you are fearful as a person, you're not showing up as a person? And part of it is even showing up in terms of, this is the work I've done, communicating your own value. And the harder one is, are you confrontational? And that is where EQ comes in. I've been in mining 10 years and only once I had a female manager. The rest is working with different males, race, age. You need to have the skill and the art of learning who is the leader in front of you. However, some of us, I'm going to call it, don't have the skill to understand what is needed right now for me to have a healthy relationship with who the leader is in front of me. And that is why the mindset that you have as a human being is important, because the obstacles and the struggles that we find ourselves in, they could kill us. However, if we choose to learn from them or to learn through them, they could enable us. I have one rule: I have no enemies. All of them are teachers. All of them are allowing me to see how to lead or how not to lead. But when some of us have not done the work that you need to do to be in your own skin, comfortable in yourself, you might find yourself feeling like a victim. And when we are at that moment, it becomes very challenging to work there. And our self-esteem is now being impacted. So the most important thing, guys, to check: where have you given your control? Is it inside of you, meaning internal locus of control, or is someone having that control, meaning the colleagues who laugh when you pass, meaning the boss who screams at you? Whatever it is as a scenario, does it now control you, or do you still feel you have the power to respond differently even when it's happening?
You know, I respect you, Boniswa. I don't think I'm that mature. I don't think I've done that work for myself. And I'll put this across to both Nandi and Komotso. How, with everything Boniswa said of where is your control? How do you keep control in the legal sense, considering employer-employee relationships, when people are spreading malicious rumors about you or insulting you, or especially when some of these things are based on race, gender, disability, I'll even throw in xenophobia in there. You know, how do you keep your control when you haven't reached that Zen state that a lot of us need to get to, honestly, so that we're not affected by some of these things? But how would you, I mean, if you were going through these things and someone's spreading rumors about you and you can sort of have proof, how would you go about recording some of these things in preparation for either lodging a grievance or taking back your control, which I think lodging a grievance is you standing your ground? How would you, I'll give it to Nandi, how would you go about some of this?
So it's so important that all of us realize that, you know, when we're at work, you're not someone's child, you're not someone's object to play with, right? You're a professional and you're there to offer a service etc. Right? So now, should you find yourself in this unfortunate situation where someone is bullying or harassing you for whatever or for whatever their reasons are, is every organization needs to have a grievance process in place, right? So a grievance is when there's a dissatisfaction or an injustice that you are experiencing. So this is a platform where you are able to vent, in a way that is recorded and in a way that is controlled, to say so and so is harassing me, or this is what's happening and I feel that I'm harassed, etc. And the minute you lodge a grievance process, I mean, the law is very clear that those kind of processes need to be resolved as quickly as possible. Especially why? Because it lends itself to, because any grievance that is unresolved means that the employer is failing to keep the work environment healthy, is failing to keep the work environment safe, and therefore the employer is failing in its duties towards you as the employee or the victim in this case, right? So a grievance needs to be attended to very quickly. And should you find yourself unhappy with the outcome or with the way that it's been dealt with, I mean, there are levels depending on the size of the organization that you find yourself in where you can. And I mean, the grievance procedure will actually inform, the steps that need to be followed and steps that will help you as the employee to follow. And even then, if you're not happy still, when you reach the final, steps or final stage of this grievance process, you are then free to then go out, which is go to the CCMA or go to the bargaining council and lodge, an unfair labor practice, I can say, and employer for failing in its duties towards you. So I read somewhere someone said you must confront your harasser. Not everyone has the ability or even the control, as it were, to approach this person and tell them, of course, this person could either be your manager or your supervisor. And we all know what happens when you sort of stand up for yourself in those kinds of situations, because not every, but sometimes at the same time, until you say no to someone and tell them that this makes you feel uncomfortable, they probably won't stop, because in their mind, they just think, it's just a joke. But when you tell them no, and you record it, and I know, I believe in paper trail. You record something on email, whether it's a message to, you report it to HR, there's a witness, you tell your, fellow colleagues or someone, but you need to do something. You can't sit with this situation that makes you feel uncomfortable and hope that something will happen. You need to, you need to have some sort of control. And that's why I mentioned that, the law allows us the opportunity to actually take up and stand. And if you're not comfortable telling the person to stop or approaching your harasser or whatever, then there is a grievance process that should be in place that you can actually take advantage of. And hope.
Yeah. What I get from what Nandi's saying is that, in as much as you might not have the confidence to speak and confront your harasser, or you might not have the confidence to actually go and start laying down some of those boundaries, you're still not trapped. The law allows and the duties on the employer to actually provide an environment for you to be safe. And should you not feel that way, internal grievance processes should be laid in place. This is even when it's a small business. I mean, I know we spoke about it depends on the size of the organization, but even in a small business, you need to know that you can actually go to your employer. And here I'm thinking about like a small business where there's 3 or 4 employees, and literally your boss is everything. They're HR, they're accounting, they're payroll, they're everything. So they literally hold your life in their hands. You can still go and have a conversation with them and lodge a grievance in the technical sense, because they would not probably have formalized procedures than in a big unionized environment. But what I liked is that keep a paper trail. All lawyers swear by a paper trail. Make sure you write these things down. If it's happening to you, if you've been bullied, no matter how small it seems, whether you were called stupid, where you were told you can't do the job, write it down. Dates and times are very important, because should you not find joy internally and you go to the CCMA, the first thing they're going to ask you is, where's your evidence? What are you talking about? Even better, if you can get a witness, which is not always great, because I mean, if you and your colleague are in the same place, they're not trying to risk their job because of you. I mean, they might like you, but hey, you're not paying their bills. So having a witness, you'll be lucky to have a witness. Again, these are things that can happen more in a big unionized environment because there's a lot of protection in those type of spaces, but it does not mean that you're trapped. And it goes back to what Boniswa also said, take back your power. You can take back your power quietly by making sure that you make notes of when some of these things are happening to you, and to follow some of the processes that should be set in with regards to having a grievance process. I'm just going to go back, and I looked at the CCMA leaflet on harassment where it says some of these things. I mean, some of the things that it said were happening to me and have happened to other people, but because it just seemed so ridiculous, it just seemed like, oh my gosh, maybe this is just how work is supposed to be. And it's something that we wear with a badge of honor, where we tell people, oh my God, my boss is this bad. And then someone comes and tops that story with an even worse story. So some of the things, and I kid you not, things like spreading malicious rumors, that's considered harassment. Insulting people, that is harassment, especially on a race, gender, disability ground. Ridiculing or degrading others, picking on them or setting them to fail. This is something Khomotso had spoken about earlier, where people just gang up on you, where people just don't like you and they gang up on you. And you're thinking, how do I even start going to complain about people ganging up on me? Again, it goes back to, do I just keep quiet and I'm the adult in the situation and I'm here to provide a service and I focus? That's all well and good, but when let's not lie, we're human beings. These type of things will affect us, will affect how we feel, and will affect how we even perform in our jobs. Unfair treatment based on race, gender, sexual orientation, pregnancy, age, disability, religion, HIV status. Khomotso, I'm going to bring you in here because this is a conversation we've had previously. Some of the main things that happen, I mean, we can't ignore the fact that we're in South Africa and our rainbow nation might not just be that much of, the rainbow might be fading a little bit. And one of the things we've talked about is racism in the workplace. How do you deal with it? You know, especially those of us who work in government, I guess we're a little lucky where we don't deal with race, but we have our own problems. But when you're living in corporate South Africa, we'll talk about those problems just now. But when you're in corporate South Africa, it's inevitable. I mean, I can't remember what the stats are, but is it like something like less than 10% of Black people are in senior management or even management roles? So chances are you're going to have a white, and not all white people. I'm not even going to get into the race story, but let's just talk about some of the insidious nature of racism at work. Sometimes it's overt and it's clear and it's in your face and you know what you're dealing with every day. But I think when it's not, it's even worse because you don't know where you stand. Let's have that conversation for a little bit.
So, okay, so the thing about racism, in South Africa is that, okay, there's no longer apartheid per se legislated, written down in our statute books. And everybody claims to not be a racist. And racism does not show itself in a very clear way anymore. It's very rare that you're going to go to work and your boss is going to lash out at you and call you the K word. It's very rare. Most of us will die without that ever having happened to us at work. But racism has changed its form and it has become this much more hidden, much more insidious monster in the workplace that manifests itself, for example, in bullying, that manifests itself often when you come to the issues of things like promotion, not even just promotion, just workload management. Who gets more work, who gets what work, who gets which clients, who get what, you know, that type of issue. Those kinds of things happen much more regularly and they are incredibly difficult to demonstrate. If you, for example, want to lay a grievance or go to the CCMA, because you will know in your heart something is wrong, but you can't show it. And a lot of people, that is really the way racism manifests in most corporate environments now. And the real difficulty, I think, is our law doesn't make provision for that kind of thing. We call them microaggressions, but I've been saying I hate that term because they're not micro at all. They're huge aggressions because they affect your everyday life at work so significantly.
Yeah.
This is also not only in relation to racism, but this also manifests a lot in relation to sexism and homophobia and xenophobia. That is the way discrimination manifests itself now. It is more undercover. And often when you say something out loud, people will say, no, I think you're being, it's not like that. She's not like that. And that's
Being sensitive.
yeah, you're being a bit sensitive. It's not like that. You know, that's what people will normally say to you, but you know something is not right. The difficulty is, like I said, it's difficult to prove. It's not legislated. There's nothing in legislation that says microaggressions are not allowed. This is manifest as unfair discrimination. I mean, some of the stupid things that happen that people think are not problematic is you as an individual do all of the work. Somebody gets to a meeting and takes all the credit, and they even forget your name during the meeting. Those are the things that happen in so many situations on such a regular basis that it appears to be, actually it does have some underlying, whether it's racist or sexist or whatever the case may be, it does have some basis. And the other thing is, or the problem with this type of issue is that workplace culture is so inculcated within the very fabric of an organization, its individuals, its policies, how it enacts those policies, how it handles grievances, which lawyers does it call to do their disciplinary hearings, who are those lawyers, are they all white lawyers dealing with all of these cases, making the same decisions all the time? So those kinds of things are sort of woven into the fabric of an organization, and it is incredibly difficult to shift the culture of an organization if that cultural shift doesn't come from the top. It is, if you are at the top, it takes a great deal of courage and bravery as a manager to say, I'm insisting that things are different. I'm insisting that things change. So the question is, who do we call on to be brave? Should employees be forced to be brave, or should we rather be asking management to start being brave?
You know, bravery is something that's really underestimated when it comes to justice, because personally, I think justice is 60, I'd even go as far as saying 70% bravery and 30% knowledge of the law, because you might have all the knowledge in the world, but if you don't have the courage to stand up and be brave, whether you're an employer or an employee or in management, then nothing's going to change. And it's either, a lot of times being brave often means that you are risking your career in that organization and possibly even future employment. Another thing that Nandi, I know I'm going to bring you in here, and Boniswa, is ageism. You know, a lot of us come into these workplaces, we're young, we're ready to take on the world, we've learned all these amazing things in the 4 or 5 years we've been in school, we've got masters, we've got honors, you know, like we are ready to go. You get into this workplace where a lot, one, your age, your enthusiasm, your intelligence, the way you articulate yourself, even your humility is taken advantage of or is seen as a threat. How do you deal with that? Because it's so soul crushing, because all you want to do is show people that I'm really good. Just give me a chance. Just give me a chance and I'll show you how good I am. But often you don't even realize it, that it's nothing, it's not even personal, it's not even about you, but it's just that you're coming in and you're upsetting the status quo, because some people have been in a position for 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, even 10 years, and here you come and now you want to be a star. How would you deal with, and Bonnie, you spoke about knowing how to have relationships with those who are leading us. How would a young person be able to deal with wanting to give so much, but only being allowed to give so little?
Oh, I'm on. I was thinking I'm mute. I'm laughing because I'm remembering my years in mining. We always had old, I'm gonna call it older than my dad, people who do the work. As much as you're coming in as a young engineer, there is something that is called tact. If you're a young person, if you don't have tact, it becomes a problem because you come in there and say, I have a certificate. Then people look at you and say, oh, we have experience. And 10 years experience trumps any
Yes.
certificate you're coming with.
Yes.
I'm a big believer of humility. Humility doesn't mean we are weak. Humility doesn't mean we are, I'm going to call it walkovers. There is a humility we need to meet each and any individual we come across with the same amount of respect that we would like to receive, and also a level of trust. And that is where now we are learning how people work, how people, I'm going to call it, respond. So in any environment you're coming in, my biggest liberation when I started, the general manager said to me, no one here is called Papa, Daddy, Mr. Sir. You call us by first name, because we are, as an organization, working through the barriers of age. So it was a known thing that from person cleaning the offices to the general manager, everybody's called by their name. However, the cultural part of who we are, I could never call someone older than my father by their name. I would always say, Ndades Mangmang, Babus Mangmang, to show my respect. So there's a personality of who we are that we bring with to the work experience. And the moment we try to, I'm going to call it, be chameleons, to shift and change, we move away from who we are. The first thing I would say, it is important to be centered in who you are, so that you know what you bring to the work experience. If you find yourself with someone, ageism, as we would call it, this is someone who is, I'm going to call it, terrified of technology, terrified of your new innovative ideas. Instead of attacking them, instead of being confrontational, it is so important to learn the skill of bringing people along. Show them how it benefits them. Show them how it makes their work better. So you walk the journey. Like in any relationship, nobody meets you and wants to marry you tomorrow. Hello, there's courtship, getting to know people. So at work, it's the same thing. By the time we call the lawyers, that means all the levels have failed.
And that's, Nandi, that's where you come in. Nandi, the lawyers have been called. Everything is not going great. I was just about to swear, sorry about that. But things are bad now, Nandi. You have been called in, temperatures are high, everyone hates everyone, everyone's calling, no one is even shy of using all sorts of words that we use when we are drinking, now that we are allowed to drink. But like, how, Nandi, what would you be, as an attorney, when you walk into a situation like that, and I want to hear from both like an employee side and an employer side. Let's start with the employee side. You've tried everything. You've tried to be humble. You've tried to learn. You've tried to teach. You've tried, but nothing is working, especially when it comes to ageism. I mean, racism is a bit more of one that I am not quite sure how we would handle it. But with ageism, you've tried to do your job, but for some reason, because you're seen as a threat, nothing is ever good enough, or your manager's overbearing, micromanagement, you've tried to set boundaries, that didn't work, constant criticism, you're never good enough, working excessive hours, being expected to be on call 24/7, and you've just had enough. What as an employee, what are your options? How do you even start navigating this, minus now the internal legal grievance procedure that did not work because you were just like, this is a sham, this is a sham, this is a sham, which sometimes it can be, sometimes it's not. But I mean, what advice would you give to an employee who finds themselves at this impasse?
All right, sure. Yeah, no. This one is very interesting because it happens quite a lot, and I think I've having to deal with cases where an employee will say, yeah, I am with 20 years of experience working in this position. Here comes this young, maybe white boy who comes and I have to train them, and then next thing they become my supervisor. And there's one incident, and then there's an incident where, like Boniswa mentioned, that you find yourself having to now being told that watch the way you speak to me, I'm older than you. You know, when everything fails in the context of a professional relationship. I mean, I've had that happen to me as well, you know, where a fellow colleague, you know, said, oh, don't talk to me like that, mind the way you talk to me. And I had to remind the person that, hello, we are colleagues here, we're in court
Yes.
and representing clients. So I think it's always important to remember the context within which you find yourself in. So if it's in a professional setting, that at the end of the day, it boils down to, why are we here? You know, yes, there is respect, and you know, respect, it goes both ways. Humility goes both ways. So if you are an older employee, you can't mistreat a junior employee in a certain way and hope that they will still respect you, etc. You know, and I think this is where also mediation comes in, and the employer ultimately needs to show leadership in these kind of contexts. Yes, there are certain situations where even the law doesn't necessarily resolve the issue, because the issue is more of, it's an attitude issue, it's a personality clash type issue, you know, and one can always ask that maybe let's have an external person come in and mediate, and let's look at what is the issue here, you know, is the issue a issue of personality, and is the issue of, is it jealousy, is it insecurity, what is it? And I think, you know, we need to start moving away from burdening, you know, the tribunals and burdening the courts with issues that we can actually resolve under mediation, alternative dispute resolution rather. And this is where now an employer or a leader within that context needs to show up and say, you know what, let's have a discussion, let's talk about this. And goes to what also mentioned earlier about the culture in the organization, you know. So if you happen to find yourself in an organization where they induct you and they treat everyone fairly, and it's an open door sort of policy, it's an environment where we take whatever feeling you have seriously, and we want to work towards making you comfortable, you know, that kind of environment makes it easier for you to sort of deal with those type of scenarios. But ultimately, what are the values of that company? What is the culture in that company? And you know, what does the leadership say? You know, where does mediation play a role? And I believe that mediation plays a huge role in those kind of situations, because it's more of a social type of scenario, and not necessarily has to do the actual work, but just because of this this feeling of, because I'm older or because I'm younger, therefore this is how you're supposed to treat me. So I think that there are creative ways of resolving those kind of disputes. And you know, as an organization or the employer, the main person, ultimately, you need to make that decision to say, let's not. I mean, even with a grievance procedure, it allows for an informal way of resolving a situation, and an informal grievance process would allow, you know, for the parties to vent and put everything out on the table, and have the person who's mediating this process to come up to some sort of solution. And often the solution would be, okay, let's move you to another department. Let's do this and that, because clearly there's a personality clash. But we must caution that in the event where the personality clash is so strong to a point where it makes, you know, the entire office, you know, environment unbearable for everyone now, and sort of pitting employees against each other, etc. And we're choosing sides and their factions now at the workplace. It becomes another thing where the employer can now even explore what's this? It becomes an issue of performance, and to say that, you know what, you are incompatible, you know, to work in this space, and we'll have to let you go, you know, depending. So yeah, it can become quite serious. And I think at the end of the day, like Vanessa said, humility goes a long way, respect goes a long way, you know, and not just between employer and employee, but also amongst employees. You know, it goes a long way. And yeah, yes.
I think I don't want to let you go, You spoke about when things get really bad and the employer explores the possibility of you no longer being compatible with the organization. So I'm guessing this, with the grievance procedure, that's something that's initiated by the employee in trying to almost resolve the issue. So you're bringing the issue to the table. You're actually being mature enough to bring this to the table and saying, please, can we fix this? When it becomes an incompatibility issue, this is now the flip side of the coin, where the employer is like, you gotta go. But I mean, in labor law, we all know that the responsibility on the employer to end an employment relationship is a lot more stringent than, hey, we can't deal with you anymore. So in that situation, I mean, disciplinary proceedings would be brought in if the people want to follow fair processes. So, I mean, I've heard of people being accused of being insubordinate, don't take instructions, difficult to work with. So these are some of the charges that would be brought by the employer in an effort to try and get rid of an employee, I suppose, because of some of these personality clashes. So please talk to us about how an employer would go about doing something like that, and how you as an employee can defend yourself. Because there's a lot of times when, I'm going to use the words that we've all been using, you know it's not fair, you know it's not true, you know it's not right, you know this is a plot for you to leave. How would you deal with the disciplinary process that's been brought against you as an employee when you know that there's deeper personality issues than what is on the surface of a charge sheet?
I think for me, something that I always advise my clients is go through, exhaust all of those internal processes. Keep the paper trail coming, right? Because as Thomas mentioned earlier on, that it becomes very difficult sometimes because you know in your heart of heart that something is wrong and I just don't know how to prove it, you know? But at the end of the day, when someone is, I'll make an example with probation, employees that are placed on probation, for instance, and you do everything in your might and you perform and you really, you know, your performance ratings aren't bad. You actually show up, right? And you find at the end of the 3 months or the 6 months, the employer says, you know what, I don't like what you've been doing, so I'm just going to let you go. I'm not going to offer you that permanent position anymore. You know, so I'm letting you go after they've done the inquiry, etc. So, you know, some of the things that, you know, the LRAs always talks about is, but the employer needs to be very clear about what is it that you don't like, or what is it, where is the problem area that you've identified, and what have you done as employer to assist this employee to then live up to the standard that you want them, or to work towards the standard that you have set for your organization, right? So as you've mentioned that it's not just with the employee who has to sort of come to the table and show and keep record of everything that they've done, but equally the employer has to be proactive as well, to say these are the measures that I've taken to assist and to help and to do this and that and the other, and it's just not working anymore, right? And at the end of the day, if you find yourself, if the employer then decides, you know what, you before you came, everything was hunky-dory and we were happy, but seemingly you're the one who has a problem, and you know, often the employer will get other employees to sort of be witnesses and say, yep, since 90 came on board, things that have been terrible, you know, and that's when we, you know, there's the issue of you being the one who's actually incompatible, you know, and that in the workplace, and so that would follow the normal processes of under that are set out under an incapacity, to say that, okay, you know, we've done everything in our mind, we've offered you training, we've offered you mentorship, we've done this and that and the other, and seemingly you're just disruptive, your attitude is not amazing, you've got a temper, you know, you push, or whatever the case may be. So, I mean, even then, there's so much that the employer still needs to do before they can even just get rid of it. You know, it's over, we don't like you, and yeah.
Grace, can I just jump in?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I just wanted to add, I mean, just to add to and agree with what Nandiba said about what happens at the sort of the end of the line. Look, an employer has to, it doesn't really matter how like your personality fits, if there's a personality fit or lack thereof. Ultimately, you've got to have done something that is dismissible, right? So if there are trumped up charges, so let's imagine that you don't get along with your manager and they create all of these charges about you, right? Often the best thing to do is to focus on the charges at hand. As an employee, it's really important for the audience, you are probably never going to be able to prove that conspiracy. I sometimes say to people, just forget it. Forget the conspiracy. Forget it. Out of the window. Did you do the thing or you didn't do the thing? Period. That's what it comes down to. Did you commit the misconduct? You didn't commit the misconduct? It's fine. The employer must come and prove you committed the misconduct. Is your performance poor? The employer must come and prove that your performance is poor. The vendetta, it doesn't matter. You can get to the CMA and say that there's been a vendetta against you for years. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. There's nothing in the LRA about vendettas, okay? There's nothing like that. So you need to let it go and keep it moving and focus on the hand. And the other thing that I wanted to add also is the end of the line. So there's also options of, a lot of times employers offer employees mutual separation agreements. That often is a big thing when there's incompatibility. To say you and I we're not gelling, it's not working, you're not fitting into the team, but we're willing to pay you this amount of money for us to go our separate ways. And those agreements,
it's hush money.
Yeah, but those agreements are valid, and sometimes it's better because you save yourself the litigation. You know that this person hasn't done anything wrong, so you're not going to put it on their record that, okay, this person committed a misconduct or they perform poorly. You don't have to make up that lie. You have an engagement with the employee to say, are you happy? You don't seem happy either. We're also not happy. Let's talk about how we can part ways, right? And the last thing that often people, sometimes I was talking about changing the fabric of the organization. That is a very high mountain to climb. Don't think about leaving the organization. So sometimes, as much as it's not easy to find jobs. So I'm not going to minimize the difficulty that lies in looking for work. It's very difficult, and I wouldn't advise people to just quit without having another plan. But sometimes you must leave a place. Sometimes the place isn't good for you. Sometimes it's not a good fit for you. Forget about whether you're a good fit for them. Sometimes it's good for you. Every day you're unhappy. Every day you're miserable. It's not working for you either.
Yeah.
People will fight tooth and nail to stay within an organization. I don't know, unless the issue is that you can't find something else. Sometimes you must just go. People will be in the organization for 20 years, fighting every level, laying 50 grievances. They're going. And they're like, they'll never get rid of me. They go to the CCMA, they get reinstated. They're never leaving, I don't understand. So, I mean, some people get so mad and so belligerent, and anger takes over the entire process, and they don't say to themselves, basically, this is not for me.
I think it becomes personal. It becomes, it really, and they personalize it. And for all those years, they're fighting it because you will not tell me when to leave. I will leave when I'm good and ready to leave. We have a question, and it's crazy. I am one of those who, in my personal capacity as an employee, I have fought instances of feeling, but I mean, I learned early on, and luckily I think it's because, well, we studied law. I kept a note of everything, to the point where I would email myself just in case, like, the laptop would crash and I would lose all my notes. But it's one of those things where when you finally get up to actually even lay the grievance, it's not an easy thing. It's not an easy thing because it's still your word against theirs. You could have overreacted. Somebody else could have been going through the same thing and did not react the same way that you did. So it's something that we have a question from Jermaine, and I'll get to it now. And it's something I want to bring Boniswa on. Thank you for actually saying that. I wanted to ask you, when do you, as Homotsu said, it's not a good fit for you. when do you make the decision to stay or to go? When is it worth it?
Okay. I'm laughing. I love what you said, because sometimes we love the fight more than being there. And I'm saying this because during this lockdown, guys, before I answer your question, I had about 3 people saying, one is saying I resigned. One is saying they let me go, gave me a package. One was calling to say, Boniswa, I don't want to go there. Should I just send through my resignation? The truth is this: when we are not aligned with what we're doing, where we're doing it, there's going to be tension, there's going to be conflict. However, if we are not willing to take the responsibility for that tension, for that conflict, it is easy to keep blaming. It is easy to keep fighting. And yes, there's a time where the fight is required, where it's unfair, and the code of conduct, guys, anyone who's working, know the code of conduct, know the policies. I'm one of those people who love reading. I know the law. You must know the law, so that when you call the Grace and Khomotros to help you, you are in line. The keeping the evidence, it is important. However, before we get there, it is because trust has been violated. It is because there's misalignment of personalities. There's personality type, guys. Sometimes it's not that people are excluding you. It is just that the way you operate, they are not flexible. You are not flexible. So my only question before I say, when do you know? I would like you to check, are your values aligned with the values of the company? 1. 2, are the way, I'm going to call it, the values of the company, care and respect, collaboration, innovation, are we living them? Because values are words, but can we articulate what we actually do as an organization to live out our values? Is my manager living the values? My friend, who is a career coach, normally says people join the company for the reputation, the brand of the company. However, we leave because of the managers in front of us. Nobody ever leaves the company. We leave our bosses.
True.
So you know when your values are not aligned. So staying in a place where your values are being violated every day, you are not going to be okay. And then the cost becomes, what do I get in the living process? And that's where, if it's against you, you might lose. But if you are being violated, you are being mistreated, then the law could be in your hand. CCMA, 3 months payment, 6 months payment. In the end, separation is inevitable if our values are not aligned.
I think you hit the nail on the head. Separation is inevitable when our values are not aligned. Guys, let me go to Jermaine's questions before we actually go to some of the specific Zoom questions that we got on the webinar link. So Jermaine asked, I want to get the feeling of the panel. In an instance where the employer indicates that they will terminate your service based on the reason that they claim you don't fit in with workplace culture, would that be a credible reason? Nandi, I'm gonna give that one to you.
All right, so sure. All right, so incompatibility. You don't fit in, we're just not gelling, literally. And you know, the LRA is very clear in terms of the grounds of dismissal. You dismiss because there was a misconduct, you dismiss because there's an issue of capacity, you know, and or because of for operational reasons, right? So the courts have, these cases have actually have been dealt with by the courts a number of times, and essentially what the court has said was that there's a process that needs to be followed at the end of the day. And essentially is the process that needs to be followed is that the employer will obviously have to call you in. There's an inquiry that is done, and you know, you are presented with the facts, which are the you know, the situation that is arising, you know, and the employer has to then facilitate a process where the offending employee is advised of their conduct that is causing the disharmony, and essentially to also say who is feeling upset by Nandi's, conduct. We then discuss possible ways of remedying whatever whatever conduct is that is causing this disharmony at work, and can we look for ways in which we can remove the cause of this disharmony, and alert, of course, the employee that if we can't find an amicable solution, then there will be a possibility of termination of employment. But also, I think the crux is giving that employee an opportunity to remedy the situation and allow them the space to fix, the attitude, if it's an attitude problem, or a misunderstanding of values, or whatever the case may be. Because I think sometimes as humans, we never really get to see our blind spots, right? You think that you are okay and that you are interacting or engaging with people in a cordial way, and only to find that people which don't enjoy your company, So once this has been brought to the attention of the employer must then, and we've explored possible ways of remedying the situation, we then need to give you again, Nadia, an opportunity to then allow you to remedy the situation, and to also allow you an opportunity to speak your side of the story. It could honestly be because you weren't aware that you were offending people or you were making people upset, or, and then obviously consider alternative position. Let's say that maybe this situation is out of hand, I can't work with this person, then we consider maybe let's move you to another department, let's move you to a different space. So dismissal is always an act of last resort. So it's never something that we always jump. We always find it's a relationship. We talk things through. We find solutions. We look, for alternative ways in which we can work together and continue to be in this relationship. However, should we find that even after all of those efforts, after counseling, after mentorship, after training, after, you've been given time off, maybe, I don't know, whatever, because it could be, and the reason why sometimes it's called progressive discipline, and the reason why we have that is simply because we, as humans, we go through a lot. There are people who actually who's going through a divorce and is lashing out when they get to work, so it's for the employer to actually establish what is the problem. Why are you so frustrated? Why are you so angry with everyone? And then once they start digging deep and having these, conversations, that's when the employer is able to pick up, oh no, I actually have to refer Unai to a wellness program because she's going through a divorce. They maybe give you time off just to go through everything. Others are struggling with, drugs or alcohol issues. So that's why it's not always a knee-jerk reaction of if you're drinking at work, automatically you're dismissed. No. Take that person for counseling first. Let's find solutions because we're human, and it's a relationship at the end of the day. So, and I think it's the difference where in this context where post 1994, 95, with the labor relations versus back then where if you did something or you would just be fired on the spot. But now we allow for progressiveness and progressive discipline where we actually engage and understand this person is human and there's possibly a reason why they're behaving or conducting themselves in the way that they are. So ultimately it boils down to that. But if all of that, even after the intervention, it fails, then yeah, separation is inevitable.
I think what I'm hearing from all my panelists is that there comes a point where both legally and personally for yourself, you need to make a decision. And honestly, no one can make that decision for you, not even the law. You can go to the CCMA, you can win, you can be reinstated, but do you want to stay in that toxicity forever? Just to add a lot to what Nandi has already said, I mean, when the employer wants to come after you, and we spoke about charges that are brought against you, Jermaine, one of the charges, some of the examples of charges that they might put in there, and some of these things I saw for the first time, and I knew what the English meaning of them was, But once it's put in a disciplinary charge sheet, it takes on a whole new meaning, because then they're speaking to you as a person. They're saying, you, Grace, are insolent. And when you look at the definition of insolent as a charge, it's, wait, I'll go there now. It's an action by an employee that constitutes and shows disrespect to the employer. So in that time when you're going through a divorce, or you're being bullied, or you're being gang picked on and all these things, and you decide to lash out, they're going to take that one incident where you lashed out, and they're going to probably put that in the charge, and they're going to say you were insolent. And then you are going to say, no, but I was provoked. These people, they've been picking on me all this time. But you are the one who was caught, and there was a charge brought against you. Things like insubordination. I mean, I've seen insubordination charges that are so wild, but they're on paper in black and white. Insubordination would be something like intentional disobeying of a reasonable and lawful instruction given to you by management. So some of the questions that came in from the Zoom meeting was people saying that, yeah, I was given a deadline, and yeah, you know, it was too much. But there is a way that these things can come back to you where your employer will say, that was a reasonable and lawful instruction, and we expected you to complete the task because in your capacity that you've been employed as this person, you are expected to perform at a certain level. It doesn't matter that you're going through a divorce. It doesn't matter that your kid is sick. You know, so sometimes you will find some of those employers who will put a name to whatever that harassment is, and to validate it and make some things that don't always seem real. Another one that's an example, before we start going to the actual questions, is conduct detrimental to the maintenance of good order within the workplace. That is clearly you are incompatible, because your presence here does not contribute to good order. So we cannot have you here. So these are things that you will see in a charge sheet. And if you want to, there's always a backstory. There's always something that happened, but because maybe you never actually brought it up, and then the one time you decided to lash out and it actually came back to you, it's important to know what some of these charges could be or might mean in order for you to prepare yourself and prepare a defense of how you can say, oh, but this person said I was disrespectful. That's where you would come and say that, Nandi, you know what, actually, humility is important. You would apologize and say, I was going through this, I didn't mean it, you know? But it's important to understand that these things, these feelings can be synthesized into words that become charges against you that could end up leading to you losing your job if you haven't sufficiently thought of a defense to them. So thank you so much for that, Nandi. I think it's important to be mindful that the power sits with you. It doesn't always, you can't always be the center of your own power, and we're all human beings, we all lose it. But it's important to understand and figure out how you would be able to defend yourself going forward from that. Now, you've decided you can't stay any longer because your options are to stay and fight or leave, fight or flight. That's just human nature. Khomoso, I'm going to bring you in here. Constructive dismissal. You left because the situation was intolerable. Talk to us about constructive dismissal and whether or not it's something that people should even pursue.
So constructive dismissal, as you put it, as you rightly put it, you believe you have been forced to resign because your employer has made your working conditions intolerable. That is, so I think what people don't realize is that it has to be really bad. Okay, it really has to be almost objectively intolerable. You know, we're talking, you spoke earlier about insubordination with regards to instructions given to you by your boss. I mean, that's also a contextual issue. What might be too much in one workplace is a given in another workplace. But for the most part, constructive dismissal has to do with conditions that are so intolerable you cannot bear it, but you've also exhausted your internal remedies, okay? So you cannot today say, this is so bad, I'm out of here, I resign, and then refer constructive dismissal if you did nothing internally to try and resolve the issue, right? So you've really got to enforce the internal remedies. They must fail you. Okay, those internal remedies must fail you to a point where, I mean, for example, an example of that would be you are constantly reporting sexual harassment, for example, to your boss. You are telling your boss, every colleague of mine is sexually harassing me. I'm deeply uncomfortable. I'm even afraid to go to work. And your boss says, just let it go. When you lodge your grievance, they ignore your email for 6 months. They completely just brush aside your complaints. That's where we're going. That's what we're talking about with constructive dismissal. That kind of situation where you tried everything you could try. Maybe you even went to your boss's boss to try and see, can they do something? Nobody did anything to help you, right? You've got to resign, save yourself from these issues. Now, the tricky thing with constructive dismissal, normally when you get to the CCMA, so now you've resigned. Now you're at the point at which you've resigned. So normally when you get to the CCMA, if, for example, you were dismissed, remember, you can only technically go to the CCMA or a bargaining council if you are fired, if you're dismissed.
Yes.
People ordinarily resign, cannot go and refer cases. I just quit my job, then tomorrow I go to the CCMA. You can't. It has to be that you were dismissed, okay? Now, constructive dismissal is this anomaly in the system, or it's the exception. So if you are if you are normally dismissed, you stole something at the office, they fire you for misconduct. When you get to the CCMA to say, I believe my dismissal was unfair, the employer has the duty to prove that your dismissal was fair. The employer has to prove that. Now, with constructive dismissal, you first have to demonstrate that you were dismissed. Okay, but you resigned. We all know now you've resigned in this set of circumstances. You must now demonstrate these circumstances that were so intolerable that led you to resign, okay? So the onus of proof is now on you. It is only once you are able to demonstrate that, yes, these things led me to resign, I had no choice, will the onus or the duty of proof switch over to the employer to demonstrate that that dismissal was fair, okay? But the main thing is you be able to demonstrate those issues were so intolerable that you had no choice but to resign. And that will be, so constructive dismissal really comes down to you're talking about paper trails, WhatsApps, emails, whatever the case may be, recordings of conversations. You've got to bring all of those things in. Constructive dismissal is extremely, extremely difficult to prove. Extremely difficult to prove. I will not say it's not worth it to pursue it. I generally think if you've got a gut feeling that your dismissal wasn't fair, you don't lose anything by CCMA, it's free. So go to the CCMA, make your referral and say, look, I think something was wrong here. But it's incredibly difficult to prove. Your back is going to be against the wall, but I don't see anything wrong with pursuing it if you believe something that happened to you was unfair. But don't imagine that your boss did something one time to you and it's constructive dismissal. They shouted at you today, you're out the door, you're gone. And you can win a constructive dismissal dispute. It's highly unlikely.
I think that's something people really needed to hear. Constructive dismissal is very difficult to prove. Not impossible, but sincerely difficult to prove, because your boss is not going to take it lying down either. Your company is not going to take it lying down. I mean, they're going to lawyer up. They're going to come with their own witnesses. You're going to be painted as an overly emotional, overly sensitive employee, because other people, well, were fine. They're going, especially with sexual harassment. You guys can correct me, but I mean, it'll be downplayed to a large extent, where it's like, ah, man, he's just a friendly person, you know, he just doesn't understand what personal social distancing is, you know. So, I mean, it's important to know these things, because when you make a decision that you're going to go for someone for constructive dismissal, be prepared emotionally, be prepared mentally, be prepared financially, because I mean, as much as it's free, remember, you don't have a job, you're going up and down, you're not even giving yourself the mental space to even move on and move forward with your life. So it's quite an undertaking, but like Homoto said, if you've got a gut feel and you are ready for the fight, then it really is a decision that only you can make. Wow, time has gone by so quickly, but we've covered almost everything. Just for the benefit of everyone who's still here, we're gonna run through some of the questions from Zoom, and then we'll close. So guys, sorry, this topic we can go on and on and on and on and on, but we'll do a rundown of the most important things. But I mean, from what I'm hearing from everyone is have a paper trail and keep your center of power. One of the most popular ones that came through the Zoom is bullying. It can take so many forms. We've actually spoken about this. I actually put in here that I have a personal story of mine when I first got my job. But I don't think it was bullying. I don't know if it was bullying. You see, this is the problem with this topic. You don't know what it was. You just know that something was wrong. So it was my first job ever out of varsity. And on top of, your anxiety, feeling lost and all of that, I was working in a firm where this guy only hired women. And so he was very traditional in his thinking of what a woman's role is. So he got the wrong girl because I grew up in a very liberal home. But what would happen is that I would be expected to make tea during meetings. I'm like, the only person I make tea for is my mom and my dad. Other than that, you can handle yourself. We used to take turns picking up my boss's briefcase from his home. This guy could not carry his own briefcase from his home to the office. We had to drive to his home to pick up his briefcase. We were only allowed to wear heels. You were not allowed to wear flats. You were not allowed to wear sneakers. And remember, I'm a candidate attorney. I'm going to court. I'm carrying files. I'm carrying things. No. You must wear heels because it's the brand. Then what was the other thing? Oh yeah, I didn't put it here, but we always had to wear red lipstick because that's what a good girl looks like, you know? It was nuts. I was going crazy. I was literally losing my mind because first of all, I was like, you know what? I hate wearing these heels every day. This thing of going to his house, dude is still having breakfast with his family, and you're walking around there like, what is happening to my life right now? So it was one of those, I quit. I literally went to work one morning and I got an email about something that I hadn't done or I had done. I wasn't even sure at that point because, you just lose your mind. I got an email. I went upstairs to the HR lady and I told her that I quit. And she's like, no, you're joking. I'm like, no, I quit. Do you need me to serve notice because I quit?
Was an afro allowed? Was an afro allowed?
No. This was not part of the brand. Your hair had to be straightened. So, you know what? It was so crazy because you had to fit into such a box. And if you didn't fit into that, you got into trouble. It was so bad. This guy only had wooden floors in the office. And if you didn't hear your heels running, that means you were not walking fast enough, which means you were not working hard enough. So you couldn't walk. You had to I was like, this must be the Twilight Zone. But these are just some of the things that people go through in employment. I quit without a plan, without a job. I didn't even take a settlement. I was just like, I'm happy. I'm out. I need my sanity because I can't do this. But that was my personal story. Everyone has a personal story, but this was my only chance to share. So another big one that came from Zoom, which also used to happen to us. That was a lot. It was a lot that happened in 3 months, and it was like I can't do this. I can't. You actually run out of tears because it's actually that unbelievable. No, seriously. Another really, really, really big one that's been coming from Zoom a lot is working excessive hours. Anyone who is a candidate, anything, candidate accountant, candidate attorney, candidate everything, you understand that you work crazy hours because what are you doing? You're trying to prove yourself. You're trying to earn their trust. You don't know what it's like. Sundays were office days. You're available 24/7. And you have to do this without complaining and without compensation. So Nandi, I know, Boniswa, I can see you typing away, but I'll come to you just now. Nandi, what do people do in these type of situations? I mean, we know situations with overtime. We know what the law says about overtime and working hours. But the reality is a lot of people are not working their normal working hours. Do they speak to their employers? Do they start going on the formal route? Like, what would your advice be?
So this one, it's very close. This is very personal, but you know, that at the end of the day, your point of departure is always with the conversation and knocking on their door and saying, "Boss, can I talk to you?" Because at the end of it, there's a reason why we've got a labor laws that set boundaries, and labor laws that say from these are the amount of working hours, beyond this it's overtime and you need to be compensated for. There's a reason why you get paid double on a public holiday or on Sunday, right? They are there for a reason. Anything beyond that is exploitation. And there's no two ways about it. Your employer knows that he's exploiting you, right? They know it. And until you say something or you leave, they're going to continue doing it. So I would say, first point of departure is to knock and say, no, enough, because you do have a life. You know, you've got a life. You are human. You are here to learn, or you are here to provide a service, whatever the case may be. So that first conversation and how you approach that conversation is very critical. And you need to raise it. There's no way that, and then from there, depending on their attitude and how they receive your complaint, because ultimately it is exploitation and it's not allowed in terms of our laws. You know, you cannot be on standby for 24/7 unless you're getting a standby allowance, by the way. You know, we've got working hours specifically for a reason. It's there for a reason, you know. So the issues of this is how the corporate culture of the red lipstick and heels, etc. I know it happens a lot in the north of this world, but and it again boils down to corporate culture, and it goes introspection. You need to introspect with yourself whether or not my values align with what's happening here. And to be quite honest with you is that I've had a lot of my friends who went through this, exactly what you were talking about earlier on in terms of dress code and etc. And that I would classify that as sexual harassment, because we would find that depending on a certain type of client that would go to, you would be told that you need to dress in a certain way because with you being there, we're sealing the deal. You know, wear that nice red dress of yours. You know, that is sexual harassment. You know, very insidious, very undercover, because it has nothing to do with law, has nothing to do to providing the service for the services for which you were appointed for, right? But has everything to do with now, you are now selling yourself ultimately. You know, now this is work, right? So exploitation happens, and trust me, the employers, they know that they are exploiting. They're very much aware. But you need to raise it, you need to stand up to the bully and actually let them know that no, this is actually not what I say. And I mean, there are ways of, you know, handling those kind of conversations. Yeah.
Can I just jump in as well? Just to that point about especially time management. Sometimes you must just switch your phone off, and insist on the boundary, because people will just if you keep answering, they'll keep calling you, and attempt to discipline you for switching off your phone on a Saturday. Let them bring the disciplinary charges and let them show the reasonable instruction that you disobeyed. They won't. So just insist. And let people realize. But I will say, you must know that there may be a price for insisting. You must just know that. You must just. I mean, that's a painful reality, and I'm not here to sugarcoat anything. But your phone is off. Somebody's phone is on. And you must just know that in these very highly competitive environments, there's always somebody ready to pick up the phone on a Sunday afternoon and do what the boss wants them to do. And you are competing. You must decide whether that type of highly competitive environment is for you or not for you, because it's unlikely to just change because you switched your phone off.
and you're right when you said the consequence of that is that now your phone doesn't ring. You don't get the work. Or you don't get the good work, you know? So you're literally twiddling your thumbs, even during working hours, because it's like, well, you clearly don't have time for us. You know, it's very subtle in how these things are done. Bunny, I'm gonna bring you. Bunny, I'm gonna bring you in here. I know you've got a lot to say about this.
No, I'm just loving. I'm gonna add. I'm loving the switch your phone off. However,
Boundaries.
I find that, and I'm gonna be blunt, some of us don't know how to articulate what we are doing with our time. And some people, which I won't mention, know very well how to tell the boss, I'm currently busy with this and this and this. It will take me so much time to deliver. I'll be able to get to that at this time. Some of us don't know how to say that and say it in a way the boss understands and proactively communicate our progress. We go hide, we don't know or haven't clarified the expectations. So guys, your self-confidence is the most important thing. Your ability to communicate is the most important thing. Because by the time we're going to put boundaries, if you're gonna go and switch your phone off, but people don't know what you're doing, you are creating that energy that you don't want to be calling lawyers for.
That's
okay.
True.
Can we articulate what we're doing with our time, how long it is taking us? What are the, normally I always tell my clients, when you get onto a new role with a new boss, ask them how they prefer to work. One, tell them how you prefer to work. Two, agree and deliver. But how do you get in a relationship and don't ask what's required of you? And don't ask how they like it? Because remember, guys, I always say I'm here to serve my boss. It's not the other way around. And I know when to advise, and I know when to deliver, and I know when to follow the rule. Personal mastery is important.
What you're saying, Boniswa, is something that a lot of us don't acknowledge about ourselves. We don't know how to articulate what we do with our time. We overpromise, we take on too much, and then we end up delivering, failing ourselves, failing our bosses, therefore creating an environment where now you're no longer trusted and. And I think being self-aware and personal mastery, I think sometimes you need to take as much as you give, and it's important to understand the role that you've played in, sometimes, not always, but when you have contributed to a situation. You're right.
And I'm going to, I wrote somewhere here, relationship etiquette. I think it's something very important for us to equip young people. So I'm going to do a short video, give you a link to Grace to share with your network. Just the relationship etiquette, professional relationship etiquette that is required, but also how to plan your day. And I learned this when we did our social entrepreneurship at GIBS from the strategy course, that instead of setting 10 goals in a day, setting 3 and delivering on them helps you improve your self-confidence. Some of us have so much to do, we do nothing. You are constantly in overwhelm mode. Your mind is constantly thinking of what to do next, and you do nothing. And that makes you feel like crap, that makes you feel bad, that makes you not deliver, that makes you hide. So please check how you are feeling, and let's work from that. So the moment I'm done with those, I'll give you the link, Grace, you can share with your network.
Or share it, and then we'll share your post from your page. Yeah.
Awesome.
Guys, I don't want to ignore some of the questions that have come in through the chat. Seloane, I can read it out unless you want to speak up. Okay, let me read it out. I went through months of not getting on with a colleague who went from being, this is such a beautiful story, who went from being my manager to my peer at work, and it took team building for us to align ourselves. And he ended up being one of my biggest cheerleaders when I left to start my business. I think this is possibly a lot of what Boniswa has been talking about self-awareness, understanding the other person, understanding your relationship with your peers and with your managers, and managing expectations, I guess, in that regard. So that's actually a really beautiful story. I think this was from you, B. Guilt of leaving work, fear that unemployment is high, hits a lot of abuse people. Please leave with your self-confidence instead of allowing your soul to die which a lot of people do. Fix your LinkedIn profile. Yes, a lot of us don't clean up our LinkedIn profile. It still looks the same as when we first started working. Another one here, they say you need to manage your work. I think we've spoken about this quite a bit, where we say, Komoso says, switch off your phone. But I also agree with what Bonis was saying. Articulate what you are doing with your time and why you cannot take on an assignment, because you know you will not be able to meet that deadline. A behavior called covert hostility is very real in the workplace. Selwani, please share with us what you mean by that, if you don't mind.
Is converting something wanting it, or is she on? Okay, cool.
I'm
Yeah,
here.
she's
Hi,
on.
everybody.
Hi.
Thank you so much for this. This is so powerful. And hi, Komoto and I go way back to university days. We've been friends since then. So it's so awesome to see her here and just blossoming. So big ups to you, Chums. And thank you to all of you ladies as well for sharing. I think it's amazing that you're all young and professionals, and I love it. I just love it. So covert hostility, it's a behavior that I learned about when I did a course on how to manage yourself in relation to other people, and it speaks to the tone scale. So the tone scale is something that was developed in Scientology, and I mean that's a whole topic on its own, but it's very low on the tone scale, and somebody who's very low on the tone scale is rather dangerous. They, especially the covert hostile person, they appear to be supportive, to be, just friendly and all for the goodness. In this case, last year, actually, I dealt with a former colleague a white guy in this case, who was for the Rainbow Nation, for all the goodness, and why must we refer to things as supporting Black business? I believe in a South Africa that's integrated, blah, 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 blah. And inevitably, and it's unfortunate how these things happen, because sometimes it's only when it happens to you that you see things for what they are. And he had done something to a colleague. We didn't see it for what it was because we thought that she wasn't playing nice with him. But as soon as he did it to me, I immediately saw it for what it was. So covert hostile people appear to be supportive, appear to be for the team, for the organization. They want to be the positive one. They pretend to be for the leader's vision of where the company should go. In the meantime, what they're doing is they are painting an ugly picture of you, wherever you are, the target. And in doing so, they either confront you and they try to make you feel small. And then as soon as they realize that you see them for what they are, they then try to act innocent. They will cry and they will seem remorseful. And it's only for a short time that they do that, and then they rear their ugly head again. So it's a very real thing. You don't see it because they appear to be very supportive and very for the greater good. But as soon as you see them for what they are, they then try to flip the script on you and make you seem like the bad guy. So what ended up happening was I laid a grievance against this person. I literally screenshotted because he tried to attack me in one of our groups. We were doing events at the time. He attacked me in the group. I screenshotted all of those conversations. I screenshotted previous conversations where he was just being very shady. I referenced all of that stuff. I even referenced the day that we had our confrontation and the days after that. And I ended up leaving the organization, not because of him, but for another opportunity in a totally different industry. And what ended up happening was he was dismissed because he then attacked the COO. It got very ugly. But covert hostility is a very real thing. Read up about it. Look up the tone scale. It is real. Very, very real. That's all I have to say.
No, thank you so much for sharing. And I think that's what's difficult about what we're talking about here today. It's never one thing, or you don't even know if it's something or something else. And you said that when it happened to a colleague of yours, it came across as her not playing nice, but as soon as it happened to you, then you recognize it for what it is. And I think that's what a lot of people struggle with, because then how do you articulate some of these things? And but he was brave. I mean, even going after the COO. But I mean, like, the one thing I'll take away also from what you're saying is paper trail. You had screenshots to prove that this was happening. And even when you laid a grievance, you had something to show for it. So which means that even if you went to the CCMA, then that would serve as evidence for you. But yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing. And I think we're actually, a lot of us here are Vitsies at different times and space. But anyway. Guys, we are so behind time. Just a few more. Unrealistic deadlines. We've spoken about this. How to deal with not being appreciated or recognized for your contributions. Not money, but where you've sacrificed your own time, when you've been working that Sunday, your phone is always on. And then there's a reciprocal expectation of acknowledgement and recognition. How do you deal when that doesn't come? Or do you just carry on and move on? Boniso, I think this one's for you.
Yes. So when I looked at that, the one thing which came through for me is, as much as the recognition, the validation normally comes from our boss, and in our home life, it will come from our parent, there's a point where we need to, I'm going to call it self-acknowledge, self-validate, because whenever we do something, we are gaining the most. There is nothing more important than gaining the knowledge of knowing you can. So some people, and part of them is narcissistic bosses, they will use that to keep you, I'm going to call it, just scrambling for that attention, scrambling for that approval. If you're not careful, you become addicted to it. So it is so important to understand, am I not being acknowledged, even though they know that I've done good work, because they are trying to get me to, I'm going to call it, live on their approval, survive, make their approval my heir. Because if I allow that, definitely there's going to be abuse that is coming. There's going to be bullying that is coming. So it is so important to find a balance of self-acknowledging your own work and the quality of the work that you're doing.
No, thank you so much for that, guys. And I think from there, we've actually covered all the questions in different places, because it's been victimization, emotional harassment, punishment disguised as corrective action. So before we close off, I'm just going to do a rundown of everything that we've discussed today, and then give thanks to my amazing panelists. I mean, I've learned so much from the session. Number one thing, paper trail. Paper trail, paper trail, paper trail, paper trail. If you have a feeling, like Nandi said, it starts off as a feeling that something is wrong, where it's not a funny joke, where something, you are being undermined, where you are being overworked and overly criticized. Make a note in your journal, make a note wherever, just make a note of these things, the date and the times, because what's going to be crucial is, do you have evidence to support what you're saying? But be careful with some of that evidence, is that it'll still be a he said, she said, and you need to make a decision whether you're going to stay and fight and go grievance, or and go through that whole internal process that is set up both in small companies and in larger companies. In smaller companies, it's probably just a conversation that you're going to have with your boss saying, I am presenting this to you as a problem. Please, can we work towards fixing it? In a larger company, we're unionized. So it's sometimes people think it's an easier process, but it's not. But at least there, the guidelines are almost set, and there's something for you to follow. I'm going to bring in a lot of what Boniso said, that you are your own center of power, and you decide whether or not to give it away. It comes with a lot of self-learning, being self-aware, understanding who you are and your worth, and validating yourself. So understanding that when you make some of these decisions, you need to be brave enough to make them, but at the same time, self-reflection. How are you in this relationship between you and your peers or you and your manager? Could you contribute a bit more? I mean, I know we're not at work to make friends, but we do spend a lot of our time at work, and it's inevitable that you do need to be, what's the word, friendly or cordial to your colleagues, while you're still delivering on what you need to perform. There's something very important that Komoto said, that it's not just about personality. There needs to be a dismissible offense, but also that means that they need to come and say that you actually committed this misconduct and we're going to come after you for that. But that could also come in the form of something like insolence or insubordination, where when you burst out or when you're disrespectful, then those things come back to you as a charge that's actually put on a charge sheet in the disciplinary process, and the employer will say, and will use that as a way to get rid of you because you are not compatible to the organization. Constructive dismissal is a very crucial one. Guys, remember, the burden of proof is on you, and it can't just be one thing that happened and you got pissed off and you left. You need to show that the situation at work was so intolerable that continued employment was literally impossible for you. Again, you have to have evidence. I mean, you might go, say with sexual harassment, you might go there thinking, oh, this guy is just too touchy-feely. But for somebody else, they're like, well, that's just how he is. He likes to give hugs, you know? But it's not the same for everybody. So please be aware of the need for evidence, and the need to be also emotionally and mentally aware of what's happening in your surroundings, and educate yourself on how to deal with some of these things. I love what Silwani said about covert hostility and the tone scale, and that'll also give you insights to understand the kind of people that you're dealing with for you to be able to effectively deal with them going forward. I might have missed something, but mediation was a big one to help resolve personality issues. I think that's what I have in my notes. I'm going to hand over to my panelists to say their goodbyes and their last words. Nandi, we're going to start with you.
All right, thank you so much, Grace, for having me. I think it was such a fruitful discussion, and I think, my takeaway, and especially in line with what Olisa shared on, is just we continuously having to work on our soft skills and our professional etiquette, and it's something that it's something that we're never taught, whether at home or at school, and it's something that is so needed the minute you start working. You realize that it's beyond the technical expertise of the actual work, but it's because you spend so much of your time at work, and because you are engaging and relating with other people every minute or throughout the day. It basically means you actually need to work on those soft skills as well. And so, for me, that is something that I think all of us need to sort of take with and actually start investing in that as well, so that we become well-rounded people when we are at work, and also the EQ, work on our emotional intelligence as well, because that also plays a huge role in any relationship, and understanding that at work it is an employment relationship, and communication is very key. Paper trail, I can't overemphasize the importance of keeping record. It's so important to keep record, notes, emails, whatever. And again, don't be afraid to be assertive. It is a relationship at the end of the day. You've got, in as much as the employer has towards you, similarly, they also need to. So be receptive to whatever concerns or complaints. And remember that when you are raising a concern or a grievance at work, you are actually alerting him of something that is affecting or infringing rather the contractual obligation that he has towards you, which can, whether be health, or could relate to health or safety or whatever. So if you're not being a nuisance by raising a topic or raising an issue rather, or a concern, you are actually saying, hey, listen, this is going on and it's bordering on infringing the contractual obligation. And so please, let's try to resolve this. And again, approach trumps everything. And yeah, I think that's my takeaway. Thanks.
No, thank you. We've loved having you, and we hope to have you around some more. I'll hand over to Boniswa, and then Komoso, you've done this before, so you'll go last. Boniswa, over to you.
Thank you so much, Grace. For me, I would just like to, I'm going to call it warn the guys to say, when you start work, when you start new roles, it is important to support yourself to be successful in the role by equipping yourself internally to be different than who you were before. Because I loved some of that question of someone who said, the person was my manager, now my colleague. There's a change in dynamics. There's a change in how we are needing to interact. You could be leading people older than you, more experienced than you, and that requires you to be a different person. So it is so important to support ourselves by allowing ourselves to grow. Thank you so much, Grace, for hosting this. I've thoroughly enjoyed myself. Thank you, Komoso. Thank you, Nandi. So lovely to meet you.
Thank you, V. Thank you for coming. We've learned so much about self-awareness and understanding our role, and not being learning when to stand up, learning when to stay, learning how some of these decisions affect us and in our ordinary everyday lives, and the emotional charge that comes with some of those things. Komoso, over to you.
Thanks again. This is always great. Thanks to Boniswa and Nandiba for being with us today. I've learned a lot. I really like what Boniswa had to say about lawyers. We are the last resort. Myself, Nandi, and Grace, we are last. Don't call us. No, call us sometimes. but I sometimes.
we didn't go
No, all I mean is that so much of this is internal, so much of it is personal, a lot of self-work, a lot of honest self-reflection. What am I doing to make the situation toxic, honestly? How can I make it better if it's possible for me to make it better? Another thing that I was thinking is, I hope we can draw a lot more employers to this discussion.
Yeah.
Of recreating environments is about leadership. A piece of advice that I think that we should all try and know is, if you can, when looking for work, when changing companies, deliberately seek out excellent leadership, investigate questions, dig a little into an organization and say, I want excellent leaders, because even if the people who are the worst, a great leader is change the color of an organization significantly, going to change the of it, going to change how things work and change that fabric that's woven into an organization. If you can, you can seek out excellent leaders to follow. And a lot of that starts with you being an excellent leader of yourself around you.
I love what you said about seeking excellent leaders, and that starts in the interview process when they ask you, do you have questions? Ask some questions, figure out, learn about what questions you would ask, and understanding what type of leader would respond in what situation. Obviously, it's not like the final way that you would know, because like covert hostility, you don't know, you might be dealing with a person who seems great and then back at the ranch, but with all that being said, guys, all of us have had a bad boss story. All of us have had a toxic work environment story. It didn't have to be that way. We shouldn't have had to experience some of those things, especially when you were showing up as your best at work and giving your best at work, but that was not being reciprocated. Be that as it may, the saying goes, when you know better, you do better. Learning to put up our boundaries, learning the legal limits of where some of these things, how far they can be pushed. I love what my panelists have said today, because from Nandi to Komoso to Boniswa, it's a holistic approach to life, because saying that you have a job, it's governed by the laws. It's a given that it's going to be governed by the laws. The other thing is to understand that it's also governed by your internal laws. It's governed by your values. It's governed by how you were raised and what you see, what you think is important, what you don't think is important. And to understand that all of that meshes together. And like Komoso said, don't call the lawyers as your first response. Understand, like Nandi said, that we were not taught some of these things, but that's not an excuse for you not to learn how to communicate better, how to communicate effectively, how not to overpromise, because chances are you're going to underdeliver. But when you have to go pick up your boss's briefcase, you leave, because that's not going to change. So guys, thank you so much for coming. Please check out Nandi on her website, Nandi Tselanye, even on her WhatsApp page. Reach out to her for some of these services. Guys, this is a plug. I'm surprised you guys didn't plug, so I'm gonna plug you. And also please check out Boniswa. She's an amazing coach. She's called me out many times on many things that I might not have been ready to deal with at the time, but I mean, she'll pull certain things out of you even when you don't want. So check her out at Ananda Coaching. A lot of these links will be on our Luma page. Komotso, you might not find her, but you'll find her here. You'll find her here. This is where you'll find her. But also brutally honest in how she sees the world and how she perceives the law and how she approaches the law. So we always appreciate that. Thank you to everyone. I saw Jermaine was here for like a second and then he left. But thank you to everyone who shows up. Please check out our Luma Law page before I get into trouble. Please check us on Facebook, Hi Luma Law page. And from there you will get to know more about us, get to know more about the law, and please look out for the next webinar. We want to do things bigger and better. Thank you for staying on and have a great evening, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.